Because the gospel requires something a bit more from you and I. It requires for us to know that behind every spiritual battle that we fight, there is a human being that is desperate and in need for God's love. That the sword that we carry, it is not one to bring about the destruction of life, but this gospel, it is the good news that brings us unto everlasting life. And this is why we must carry the gospel to the ends of the earth at all costs.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back.
The Apostle Paul had his life transformed to a point where a few verses later, he goes and says, "But for me to live is Christ, to die is gain." Not a death wish, but for every moment that I have, I'm going to give God glory. The apostles, each one of them, by their life, have continued the gospel to our day. The reason that you and I have faith is because the gospel has been continued by the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Christ, by the life that the disciples lived, by each and one of you that know that you are the joy of Christ, that you love God above all things, to love other people, to listen to the needs of a broken world, to listen to the Word of God, and to go do as He has commanded us to do, to lift up the world from darkness into the light and eternal salvation of Christ. You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. For me, the cross before me and the world behind me, as each and one of you carry this gospel, there are the trials and heavy trials of the day. Yet, the cross before us and the world behind us.
Jesus calls disciples. So part of God's story is about how Jesus called his disciples, and it goes like this. A disciple is someone who follows Jesus. Some of the first disciples were Andrew, Peter, Philip, Nathanael, and Matthew. Jesus showed Peter that he could help others follow Jesus. Jesus showed Nathanael that he knows everything about him. Jesus called Matthew, even though others thought he was a sinner. And Jesus calls all of us to be his disciples.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back.